Hey everybody, Patton here, welcome back to the channel. So we finally have a working Nintendo DS emulator on the classic systems. This is great. Here we have the Drastic emulator, which is brought to us by Exophase. He's the one that created this emulator for Android systems. So if you'd like to show him your thanks, please purchase the Android version in the Play Store. I'll have a link in my description. And also special thanks to Dan the Man and Mad Monkey for getting this emulator running on the classic systems. So a couple things to start out with. You do not need a BIOS file to get these games to run. Although these aren't disc games, you do not want to compress them. Make sure that any game you add, this compress box is not checked. It just has to do with how the games are loaded. You cannot have these games compressed. They have to be in NDS format. Also, this is not a RetroArch core. It is an individual emulator. It is not run through RetroArch whatsoever. Let's get started on how to put this on your classic system. Make sure that your system is hacked. I will have a video tutorial in my description on how to do that. Once you've hacked your system, you simply go to the Modules tab, go to the Hakchi Mod Store, and under the Additional Functionality tab, you'll see the Drastic emulator right here. You just click this button right here that says Download Module, and it'll add it to your Hakchi program. Close out of the Mod Store, go back to your Modules tab, install extra modules. All you have to install is the emulator itself, so make sure you put a check mark next to the emulator, hit the OK button. A bar will appear on your screen, and once it's filled in all the way, it means this emulator is installed and ready to be used. So because the Nintendo DS had different control schemes, such as using a stylus or closing the system, they had to emulate that as well. If you highlight the emulator in Hakchi, you'll see here the README with an explanation of all the controls. There are two different control methods. You can use the Wii Classic controller, which is recommended because you'll make use of the analog sticks and the Z buttons up top, or you can plug in another controller into the two-player spot and use that second controller, and it can be any controller that works with your system, such as a NES Classic controller or another SNES Classic controller. I'll go over all the controls when we get to the actual gameplay. So now the emulator is installed on our system. Next step is to add the games. If we go to the end of the command line here, you'll see they are .nds games. Those are the format you want to use for this emulator. As for the command line, it says /bin/nds. This works, or you can use /bin/drastic, the same name as the emulator. So to add our games, we go to the Add More Games button, and you're going to navigate to whatever folder you have your games in. If you try and add a zipped game, you'll be given this window telling you to select a file. Just select your NDS file, hit OK. The last step is to hit this Synchronize button if you're using internal storage, or the Export Games button if you're using a flash drive. So let's head over to our SNES Classic. I'm going to go over the different options that this core uses. One more thing I want to talk about before we get into the controls are what games are compatible and not. For the most part, a lot of games will work, especially the ones that only use the D-pad and buttons. Those games work fine, unless it uses the microphone. If the game tries to pick up the microphone, then those games will automatically freeze out and you can't play those games. So there's one I know of offhand is Super Princess Peach. That game will just freeze as soon as the game tries to start because it's looking for the microphone and it can't find it. So it could be fixed in a future release. So I'm going to go over the controls using the Wii Classic controller first. Hey guys, Editing Patton here. Real quick, I just want to let you know you do not need a second controller, but it makes it a lot easier to do these different functions I'm going to talk about shortly. All these functions can be done through the emulator menu, but it really helps to have that second controller. So like I said, all the face buttons, directional buttons, L and R work exactly like they did on the DS. So when you start up a game, this is what you're going to see. So the three functions you have when using the Classic controller is that you can control the stylus with the analog stick. It's kind of hard to see on the screen. There it is. Hitting the ZL button pushes the stylus in. So like right here, we have to sign our name. So I'm going to move the stylus, hold down the L button, and move the stylus around. That's how you control with the Classic controller. The ZR button zooms into the top screen like this. So it goes to a single screen mode. And you can change that with the second controller. So you still need a second controller when using the Wii Classic controller. To close the DS, you simply hit the power button. And then when you hit the power button again, it will open the DS back up. So now with the second controller, if you hit the B button, you'll see it changes the orientation between vertical and horizontal. Hitting the select button changes the screen from left to right. The start button functions like the Z right button where it'll zoom in on the main screen. You want to make sure you have the correct screen selected, because if you hit start, then you're just sometimes looking at a map. But if you're on the single screen, you can hit the select button to switch between the two. And then once again, with using the second controller, using the D-pad will move the stylus around, and hitting the A button will make it touch the screen. So for the main part, I'll probably be playing my games like this with a single screen where the action is. I won't have access to the map or anything like that, but as long as you have that second controller, you can just switch back and forth. This is Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. This plays really well. I'm not hearing any sound stuttering, nothing like that. This is running great. So this emulator does have its own options menu, and it is accessed by either holding down the reset button for longer than a second, or you can do this shortcut, which is down and select. You'll be taken to the options menu. If you don't want to use a second controller, you can use just one controller using the options here. You can switch your screen orientation. You can screen swap, which is changing the left and right screens, flipping them back and forth. And then a couple other options, but really the only one we're going to take a look at in a second is this high resolution 3D. So let's start up a 3D game real quick. So here's Mario Kart DS. So here's how the game looks and plays normally. It plays perfect. So it looks and runs great. So I'm going to turn on that high res 3D option, and you're going to see the game's going to look a lot better, but it's going to play like this, which sounds really bad. I mean, you can turn off the game sound and maybe play that way, but I don't know anybody who would really want to play a game with no sound. So yes, the game looks a lot better, but it's a little unplayable in my opinion. I'd rather just play it like this, and you can play it on a big screen. Something else I want to talk about with that options menu is you can save the options specifically for a game or for the emulator altogether. So say I want to play Kirby like this. I'm going to go into the options menu. So here's the options down here. Save for this game or save for all games. But here's Kirby Squeak Squad. This is actually a really good Kirby game. And you can see here it is running full speed as far as I can tell. No stuttering, no hiccups. All the controls work. Once again, the controls are 1-for-1, so every button on the NDS works just like it does on the SNES Classic controller or the Wii Classic controller. Alright, so one last game, New Super Mario Bros. Also, I do want to mention that save states do not work for this game. In-game saves work great. Also, it is recommended that you upgrade to the newest version of Hakchi CE because there is a bug fix using that version of Hakchi and the Jurassic Core. But as you can see here, the game controls great. We're gonna get real big. And let's see if this emulator can take Super Mario. Just running through the level, destroying everything. Killing all the bad guys. Breaking everything in his path. Oh, we just made it to the end too. That's good. All the one-ups. So there you go. This excellent emulator for the classic systems. Huge thanks to Exophase and Mad Monkey and Dan the Man for getting this running. I don't know what else to say. This is just amazing to me. Once again, if you want to show your support to Exophase, please consider getting the Android version of his emulator just to show your thanks. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.